And if anybody wants to read what it looks like when I throw a temper tantrum against religion, that's in print, and they can read it. For
Sure.
instance, God Doesn't We Do, which was my first book, is a very long temper tantrum against religion. And if anyone wants to read it, they're encouraged to. I don't think that approach is great anymore. What happened is I live in the Southeast, so I'm surrounded. Everybody's always saying, oh, so many people believe in God. Tell me about it. I live in the Southeast. Everybody here loves them some Jesus. And there is no escaping the fact that people are going to talk about God all the time and then having to be very politic about that. Because otherwise I can't have a business. They'll burn crosses in my yard. No, they wouldn't really do that. I don't think that's too likely, but it would be a severely negative impact for me professionally to, question people's religious beliefs every time they come up, 30 times a day. So I don't. So instead, I thought I need another approach to this. Maybe what I should do is just, listen to people. And that's what actually led to writing this book. So I started listening to people. They say something, something, something about God. And I say, what are they really trying to tell me here? Think about it. I don't have to take on their mythology or their beliefs in order to consider what they are saying or what they're trying to communicate to me. And then that led me to reading copious amounts on the psychology of religion and kind of seeing where people's beliefs tend to come from and what motivates them. The example, if you want, that was kind of the watershed example for this line of thinking is that I was dealing with somebody in a professional capacity who decided it was time to start running through something that he had literally just left his church. I'm not kidding. The Creation Museum had sent a representative to his church, and he had just left that and was very motivated to talk to me about this, despite the fact that it had nothing to do with the business we were trying to conduct. And so he's going into this whole thing, and then it starts. If there is no God, then there's only man's law, and nobody has to follow man's law. And so everybody would just be raping and stealing and killing. And people, of course, atheists tend to think, wow, what a horrifying statement. But that's really not a horrifying statement if you stop and think, what's this obviously decent human being who I've known for, many years and it would not do evil things? What's he trying to communicate with that whole God's law, man's law, people would rape and steal thing? And all he's really saying is, if you take the word all he's really saying is that people have morals, and those morals have to come from somewhere. So if you take the word God out of what he said and put in the word morals and just think about it, it makes total sense that that's what he was trying to say. He was saying if there aren't morals, then people would behave immorally. And it's really not a complicated message. He was just using the word God to mean morals, or God's law in this case. And that's exactly in line with what the psychology of religion tells us are the reasons that people believe in God.
Yeah, I'm having a little hard time relating to it, and maybe it's because I live in Champaign, Illinois, because in Champaign and places like Chicago and Boston, Seattle, a lot of us kind of look at religion and go, meh, because it's not a big deal. It's like Europe, although I spent 2 years in Arkansas, and I saw what it's like when religion runs the world. And I hear what you're saying, and I agree with you that he's using God as a word that substitutes for morals, and you're absolutely correct. Unfortunately, he doesn't recognize that, so other baggage that goes with God comes with it. What do we do with that?
Well, there's multiple avenues to having to deal with this. So one of the avenues is, how do you deal with the guy when he's actually saying it? And that's in a way the harder of the two.
Yeah.
The other avenue, of course, is what do we do sort of on a meta level if we step back and we're working on it for ourselves. That's the easier one. So we'll talk about the easy thing first. What I urge people to do is to copy what I did, and is to try to step back and understand what these people are saying. If you hear that kind of thing, understand where they're coming from, and then at least you can take off the edge of confusion. So if you're confused about what they're doing, it can become very frustrating, and then that frustration can lead to a sense of animosity and all of this. And especially when you see them, running the world with this nonsense in southern states or something like that. Now, on the individual level, when it actually comes up, the best I can do is tell you to try to do something like what I do. Not that I know that it's the best thing. What I tend to do is I try to listen to the person, hear them, hear where they're coming from, and then I inject very little of myself from that point on, because this is seriously dicey territory where you're really likely to do a lot of personal offense. You're likely to damage the relationship, which is the opposite thing of what you want to do if you are trying to influence somebody, say, over time. Opinions change, but they tend to change slowly, especially about moral ideas and deep-seated beliefs. And so if you want to have an influence, you're going to have to take it upon yourself that this is going to be a slow process, and rapport and closeness are going to be required in order to facilitate that change. And so you have to hear, you have to not inject and argue, because if you inject and argue, you may very well, if these are really deep-seated beliefs, trigger a backfire effect, which is well documented. So what I tend to do is I listen, and then I ask a lot of questions. And that, of course, follows Peter Boghossian's Socratic method that he wrote about in his book, and I know
the same
for creating
thought.
atheists.
Yeah.
And I ask a lot of questions. One of my favorite questions, when the circumstances warrant bringing it up, which is not all the time. Most of the questions, to be honest with you, are just, tell me more details about that. And, trying to, not evil kind of leading somebody to contradict themselves, but just, enough questions to make them feel a little uncomfortable with what they said. And I don't lie and pretend I'm on board with what they're saying if I'm not. I just ask more questions. But one of my favorite questions is, if the circumstances weren't asking it, is, well, what's that belief doing for you? To go straight to that psychological aspect. Because a lot of times what I found is it puts somebody on a spot they're not used to being on. So it requires that level of rapport that you can ask that question first. And then it often spurs reciprocation of the same thought. Well, you don't believe in God, they might think, or sometimes they even say, how do you deal with that? And now I get to say something about humanist ethics, or why I think the way that I think, or something like that, with genuine curiosity and receptiveness on their end, as opposed to, kind of a defensive, this is my way, that's your way, kind of, resistance. So that question, what's that belief doing for you? Tell me about that. A lot of times opens up a door, but it's got to be asked with care. It's not a question you can just jump into with somebody that you don't have some rapport with first.
Yeah, and you can't be a smartass about it either.
Absolutely not. If you're going to be a smartass about, and that's so much, unfortunately, of what's become identifiable with being an atheist, is being a smartass.
Well, I've been victim of that. I won't deny it, and often I've tried to, when I get in these conversations, I'm trying to slow myself down, because it is very easy for me to go through a laundry list of all the evil shit in the Bible and prove that they're wrong about this and the other. And like you said, it becomes an attack. The walls go up. We have our shields, we have our swords, and we do battle. And I can't deny that sometimes that's fun, but I'm not sure how productive it is in most cases. Whereas if you sit back, slow down, attentively listen, ask questions that hopefully, even if you're not questioning them per se, you're asking them to question themselves and to think out loud and walk you through it, that can be far more productive.
I think it is. I think it's productive in terms of helping to change somebody's beliefs. I think it's helpful in terms of building more friendship and rapport and broadening the relationship. Once you broach these kinds of topics with somebody, it becomes easier, not harder. If you do so in a friendly way, it becomes easier to have these conversations in the future, where they don't have that care or the careful guardedness there, where, is the atheist going to flip out and go on a Bible rant if I say, something about the Bible, so more and more opportunity to have fruitful conversations can grow out of these circumstances if you approach them without the aggression or without the snark or without the snideness.
I agree. And of course, all of your books, so we have Everybody is Wrong About God, which is the newest one. And
right.
Then you said you have the older, more ranty, God doesn't, we do, only humans can solve human challenges. And I think this is also yours, ... Infinity plus God equals folly.
Yes, that is mine. And so that's really the goal of that was to talk about infinity because I am a mathematician.
Yeah.
That's what my doctorate is in. And then it was also to really build the notion of God being an idea, what philosophers would call axiomatic or a presupposition. And so if you look at the three books, they kind of run in a sequence. You have this idea of the first one, God doesn't, we do, breaks the idea that God is an acting agent, and then ... builds the idea that God is an idea, and then Everybody's Wrong About God tells us what the idea is.
Have you ever seen ABBA, the musical ABBA Dancing Queen?
Yes.
That reminds me of the play and the unfortunate musical movie where they always say ... You know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Some of the listeners might. If you don't, you're just going to have to look it up. Now, one of the things I love to do on my show, and we talked about this pre-show, is have a nice little scoop every once in a while. And you are working on another book.
Yes.
And
it's due to come out December 1st.
And to the best of my knowledge, you've never revealed what it is. Is that correct?
I have mentioned it on Twitter a couple of times, which is nearly to say that you're accurate. I have barely mentioned it at all. I have not written anything public about the existence of the book yet.
So for the listeners
and I have not told anybody about it in an interview. So you are the first.
So for the listeners of the Phil Ferguson Show, you're going to be the first to know. So that's why you listen to the show, at least one of the many reasons. What is this new book? You said it's December. Is it another God book? No,
it is a departure from that. I feel like with Everybody's Wrong About God, I finished what I had to say about God.
Yeah.
I don't really want to keep talking about God or really even atheism all that much. So what I want to do is turn my attention to topics that I think are more interesting and that I can kind of build in a positive way, as opposed to the taking down side that we could say is negative of atheism. The book is called Life in Light of Death. And so it is an approach to talking about dealing with death honestly, which of course includes not believing in a heaven. And so it is trying to fill that gap in the literature that deals with how we can reflect upon death, not about coping directly with somebody's death, if your mother dies or your sister or something, not directly how to cope with grief. That's a completely separate topic. But this is a book directly set toward contemplating the idea that you one day will die, and that can have a significant impact upon your life. You can literally refocus your priorities rather radically, realizing that you're going to die and this is your only go. And it's not just you. Other people that you care about are also going to die. So it's a book that's written with a literary instead of an academic tone, and it's very short. I want it to be something people can sit down and read in a couple of hours or less in one sitting and feel good about it. But it tries to take on what people call the terror of death. If you've ever heard of Ernest Becker's The Denial of Death, and then the field of research called terror management theory that arose from it, it won the book Denial of Death won the Pulitzer in the 70s, 74, 73, something like that. And he talks about how almost everything we do, and not least religion, is an attempt to hide from our innate terror of death.
Right.
And so this book that I'm writing is a way, it's trying to portray a way that we can, instead of hide from death, we can embrace its reality like adults and then pull something absolutely precious out that we can use to change our lives for the better.
Well, I can't hardly wait. I do know from my own parents, I don't talk about them that much, but my dad, to the best of my knowledge, I've never known anyone who has spent more time and effort planning his death. Not in a morbid kind of way, but he had this 1-inch red binder, and he collected every single document everyone would ever want to have once someone dies.